Hello, everyone. This is meteorologist Tom Down. It's a meteorologist Joe Bastardi from Weatherville Analytics, and here's our winter preview, Joe. So take it away here as we go through this presentation and we talk about the upcoming winter and hope for a little bit more activity than last year.
Well, we've had a couple of winters that I am not happy with as far as how our forecast turned out. The object of the game is to try to have a perfect forecast. And if you have a perfect forecast, people can plan on it. And going into this winter, I'm reminded of 2021, 2022 a bit where I was really very pessimistic on the winter. And after talking to Mark for a little while, he actually, and Mark has been looking at the weather for almost as long as I have, probably because his business depends on the weather. Uh, he sort of said, well, maybe you should temper that pessimism a bit. And so I did. And 21, 22 forecasts turned out to be excellent. And of course, the big highlight of that was a blizzard up the East Coast at the end of January of 2022. But the problem, if we want to talk about a problem, is the continuation of what we call a negative PDO. I don't call it a cold PDO as most people do because the ocean is so darn warm. It's based on the difference in temperatures, and it means that it's a little bit less warm in one place than it is in another place. In past years, it would be warm in one place and colder in another place, but the difference in temperature is very important. That negative PDO, when you see that, it's being caused by something called the Kuroshio current. You say, what the hell? What the Kuroshio current? Yeah, that's a current that actually starts in the South Pacific. It's part of what we call the thermohaline circulation, and it's becoming stronger and stronger as the oceans warm. I won't get into the reasons for why the oceans are warming because there are a lot of people that argue with me about it, but they are warming. That's what we have to deal with it. And you got to understand, if you have a consistent current that comes up off Japan and then it's going to make a right turn, Clyde, so to speak, it's got to slow down. And when it slows down, the very warm water accumulates from off Kamchatka. Those of you who have played Risk know where Kamchatka is. It's a vital place to hold. And that just continually moves out eastward into the North Pacific. And there's a corresponding colder area that's just to the north of it that rings around the west coast. And when that happens, it favors strong upper air ridging near what we call the date line, which is in the central Pacific. That in turn tries to drive the trough into the west, which of course tries to drive the ridge into the east. And that is a big problem. We have a weak central Pacific La Nina, and that's that's the kind of thing, believe it or not, that it's interesting how La Ninas work. In the eastern part of the United States, a weak and a strong La Nina are low snow seasons, but a moderate La Nina is a stronger snow season. There is a chance this goes to moderate. I don't want to people, slitting their wrists over this whole thing, but there's a possibility it does get up to moderate.
And there's a
One
lot of
thing
different
we are
flavors of those La Ninas too, Joe. I mean, as you said, sometimes you have some of the highlighted winters of 95, 96 was a La Nina, even though the recent winters we've had are have been
well,
terrible.
10, 11. 10, 11. I mean, you can't complain about 10, 11. And the hurricane season with high ace was sort of similar to that. And if you've been following me, you know there are certain types of hurricane seasons that have an amazing correlation to how the winter turns out. I call these Gulfocentric seasons, where the congregation of tracks is over the central Gulf of Mexico, or in the southeast into the Gulf of Mexico. 95 was like that. You saw two congregations of tracks, one over the Gulf of Mexico, one out in the Atlantic. I mean, if you looked at the hurricanes this year and in 1985 and some of these other years, 1950, the hurricane season this year resembles them. And what those all had in common was major Arctic outbreaks in December. And there's a reason that happens, folks. It's due to the rotation of the what we call the Madden Julian oscillation. I try to explain this so you can understand what we're dealing with here, not just, oh, well, this or that, or look at this model or that model. When the Mad Julian Oscillation in hurricane season is in certain phases, 8, 1, 2, and 3, we see hurricane spikes. Weather Bell, we were able to nail this if you followed us. Now, the question is, does that rotation, it moves around the Earth every 30 to 40 days, show up again in mid and late December? And all these years, 1915, 1916, 1950, 1985 is in the bunch, 2005 is in the bunch, 2000, even 2020, 2022. All right, all those years below normal temperatures, some of them wickedly extreme, showed up December 15th through 30th. But let's remember what happened with that last go around, where you had, think about this, the late season development of Ian, late September development of Ian. This year you had Milton and Hershey. Hershey. Milton, we have Milton Hershey center out here. Helene and Milton, okay? And then now you have Raphael in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're timing that up, and unfortunately, that particular outbreak did not produce snow in the east. It really wrecked Christmas in a lot of the central part of the United States. And people traveling, there was a major weather event there because there was a lot of snow out there, but fell apart coming to the East Coast. But then there were other ones like 95. There was a December 95, a lot of snow going on during the month of December. You know, who can ever forget the post Christmas storm of 2010 on the East Coast? So you see what we're dealing with here. At least it appears we're going to be on the playing field. And what we're going to look for this winter is that there's going to be fights back and forth with the MJO. It's like two pigs fighting in a feed sack. And the last time I saw this in 22, 23, the pig that made too much warm weather won the whole thing, right? So I don't think it'll be as strong this year, but it's definitely on our mind as far as that goes. The models really do not have this at this time. They don't have this cold. Well, the Canadian has actually a pretty chilly looking December, and there are implications out of the Japanese model, which I'm going to focus on the Japanese model here when we get to model land, okay? Because it's like sort of right down the middle as far as the whole thing goes. If you get all the models, everybody wants to look at models, and we'll go models versus analogs, and then come up with a forecast here.
And by the way, models typically this time of year, especially at this lead time, don't really have cold outbreaks. I mean, it seems to be a theme with the models that, aside from one or two of them, most of the models are warm, especially this far out.
Yeah, well, there's to go to the reason. What I believe is it is the planet's warmer than normal, and what the models do is they spread all the warmth out all over the place, then start feeding back, and it's hard to find cold when everything is warm. Now, this is the JMA forecast for the winter. And that's pretty close to a moderate sea surface temperature forecast, pretty close to a moderate La Nina for the winter. But there's that Kuroshio current up there, Tom, and show them that deep red up there, right? That good. And you notice the cold that the cooler that surrounds it in an arc from Alaska down to the Baja. It's a little bit cooler there. That's that. Yeah, bingo. That's that negative PDO I'm talking about, which 7 times out of 10 is sort of the kiss of death. But we do have some winters where it stands out the other way. What is interesting about this winter is it's not as cold in the Western Indian Ocean. So if we go to the Western Indian Ocean, now you say, what the heck are you talking about the Indian Ocean for? Because the difference in temperature in the Indian Ocean actually has a lot of impact on that Madden Julian oscillation that we're talking about. So we look all over the place for you. So it's not. Let's put it this way. It's see here. Oh, thanks, Tom. Thank you. See, you can read my mind. We're like twins over here. You see all that blue over there near Indonesia and Southeast Asia, right there. That is a lot of vertical velocity causing a lot of thunderstorms, which release a lot of heat into the air. That heat in turn heads northeastward, heads northeastward and pumps that ridge near the date line. So there's the problem you have. All right, so the ridge gets pumped near the date line, means the trough comes down into the western part of the United States. However, the other pig fighting in the feed sack, when you have vertical velocity patterns southeast of the U.S., like you're seeing over South America, there, cold air masses tend to look for them. So what we've got to do, yeah, that's right. It's like, okay, if you open your refrigerator, okay, the cold air rushes out, and if it's warmer outside your refrigerator, the air is naturally rising, so the cold air tries to come down. So what we've got to do for you in this winter, suppose everything. There's the MJO phases that we were talking about. Notice 8 and 1. You see the blue over South America there. Those are cold phases. And you see the other phases, the kiss of death phases, with that vertical velocity over Southeast Asia. But what we've got to do is we've got to time up the rotations because we think there's going to be a lot of cold air in Canada this way. All right. And Canada leads North America in the export of cold air. Just remember that. Mexico leads North America in the export of heat. So we always look at that. I'm only kidding. That's a joke. You could tell it at the water cooler. Okay, so what we've got to do is we've got to time up the strength of these MJO rotations. If we see a strong one coming into 8, 1, 2, and 3, a couple of weeks away, we say, all right, get ready, load up on the salt. And, we have to tell you the opposite because you don't want to overbuy. All right. So we're going to really try to hone in on that. And in your winter weather alerts, weekly winter updates, maybe get more extensive with that. But look at those phases. Look at phase one, phase one, uh, up in the upper left-hand corner. Phase two is cold. Phase eight is cold. Now that is December, January, December, January. What? Oh, MJO. I was thinking March, June, and October. What the heck is that? No, I forgot. I'm sorry about that, folks. But December, January, and February, that's what it looks like. But November, December, and January, believe it or not, phase seven is a cold phase. See, that's what's interesting about this. As you move through the months, the relationships change. So what's warm in January would be cold in December. So if we get the rotation it starts back into seven, it would give a different output than the same rotation, let's say mid and late winter. So those are the things we try to look at over here. And there's the precipitation. And what we are seeing is a lot of precipitation there in 4 and 5 over the center part of the United States. So all those things add up to what we think will be probably warmer. Well, I'm going to say warmer than normal from the East Coast through the Southern Plains and into the Southwest, and colder than normal in the Northwest. But the way it gets there is crucial. I mean, it's almost like you could watch a boxing match, and one guy is just peppering the other with constantly, and then boom, someone unloads, right? And so let's say someone unloads with a 12 to 18-inch snowstorm on the East Coast, and it's cold for 2 weeks right after, with several other minor events, thawing during the day, freezing at night, winds blowing and driving. All of a sudden, you're saying, "What the heck? I'm running out of salt over here." So, but you look at the entire winter. Look at that, another warmer than normal winter. So, the path you take is, the journey in this case may be more important than the destination. All right.
And there's many La Ninas that do exhibit those characteristics of a highly volatile pattern, and so I think moving through these MJO phases and as you said, really spicing things up in terms of weather action.
Okay. Yes. Good thing we have Tom here. Otherwise, everybody would be asleep by now. Okay. So, okay. So here's the JMA December through February temperatures. What's interesting is it sort of got a little, looks like an alley where there could be some colder going on. So again, remember an average temperature is a product of swings back and forth. I'm sure if you did an entire season's worth of business in a period of 3 weeks, you probably wouldn't complain that much if it was that warm. Okay, so and here's the precipitation. You can see there's a plethora of precipitation in the north. That's going to try to reinforce the cold in Canada. And of course, you see a lot of precipitation around the lakes into the northeast part of the United States. And all you need is a couple of storms in a row going back to back in a colder pattern with a wet pattern, and you start piling up snow. So we look at all this stuff, and what we've got to do is just be aware of these fluctuations that are going to take place, and then try to line them up for you as far in advance as we can, and of course hone in on the day of.
And then I've also had some people ask Joe about how the drought that the East is experiencing, and actually much of the country east of the Mississippi is experiencing, is going to affect the winter. And generally speaking, we see a big impact of droughts in the spring and the summer, but fall versus winter, there's a whole different set of drivers that drive the pattern. And I don't really think that, at least in my opinion, that the drought that we're all experiencing in the east is going to have very little effect on what the winter is going to bring.
Well,
So
it's interesting back here in State College. It points at a very warm winter. The two big drought Octobers here. I got taught a lesson by an Amish farmer on that. I'm dead serious. People go, "Well, that's not scientific." Well, the guy is out there plowing in October, and his horses have no hair on them because of the fact that the it's so dry and sunny. And he said, "Well, I don't think we're going to have much of a winter." And I went back and I researched dry Octobers in State College are generally very warm winters. This is back in central Pennsylvania. However, rain means a whole bunch, and there's going to be a heck of a lot of rain over the next 2 to 3 weeks, especially in the heartland of the country. I use this rule in Europe all the time, and I always catch because we got clients in Europe. I always catch them off guard over there. The UK Met and those people over there, and because when it starts raining a lot in Western Europe, cold it means a pattern. My dad used to always say that rain not only means it's raining now, but it means something that is going on, and that the overall pattern is trying to shift. And so we got a lot of rain coming up over the next 3 weeks in the central part of the United States. And then boom, here comes the JMA model. And you say, well, I don't see any below normal heights here, what we call heights here, but we see the ding, ding, ding line up right there. Go to Europe, United States, Europe, and the Far East. All right, and the horseshoe ridge over the top. All right, see that? See that pattern? That's lining up the slots at AC. All right, we got three cherries in a row here. If you get this kind of pattern, there will be a very cold mid and late December developing. And because what will happen is high pressure. This is blocking here, and when you get, and I'm already starting to see Europe turn cold. Listen, folks, when you get a lot of blocking, you have to start watching what goes on in Europe first, because they are the canary in the coal mine, and they're starting to turn. So we get this blocking locking up over the top for December, and guess what's going to happen? Suddenly, December is a nasty month. Now, that doesn't mean it continues. In fact, I hate to tell you this, the correlation of this whole idea for December is for a warmer looking January, which is interesting, which is it makes you wonder why. Well, it doesn't make me wonder. These old timers that developed such theories as the January thaw, they weren't stupid. They had to base their lives on what was going on, and they understood if you get a particularly severe outbreak in December, generally there's a thaw in January. But all this stuff is speculation at this time, just based on analogs and correlation. But if you want to know the future, you better know the past. Another interesting thing is a lot of the record warmth that's occurring today occurred in 1950, and 1950 had a brutal December in the United States. Now, again, brutally cold doesn't mean it could snow a lot. It does mean, though, that you probably have a little bit more opportunity. We had a winter in '89 where you had, after a relatively late Hurricane Hugo and a Hurricane Jerry, all right, they occurred late in the season. You had a December that it's just unbelievable how bad it was. There was snow on the ground in Atlantic City, New Jersey on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, and yet it never snowed a flake during the regular winter season, or the 21st through March 21st, but they had snow on the ground Easter Sunday, right? I mean, and they had twice the normal amount of snowfall. It all just occurred in December, right? And then winter just disappeared in January and February of '90. So, but you still always like to get ahead rather than keep fighting from behind here. So I'm just real quick because I want to just put this in the back of your head. I want you to look at those December temperatures with similar hurricane seasons, uh, strongly biased toward cold in the eastern part of the United States. So, hey, that's one thing to think about. So, what do we have? What's the next slide?
Yeah, but just to go back to this for a second, and I like the fact that you have to look at Europe and you have to see all these three different areas because a lot of what drives the weather as we talk about and we talk earlier about the Indian Ocean, the South Pacific, and all these areas, but there's definitely correlations in what we're looking at here to those types of winters from La Nina and the PDO and some of the things that you mentioned, Joe. And of course, you mentioned cherries and three cherries in a row in Atlantic City, and I'm thinking of Mickey Mouse here with my young kids. So
Well, that also Far East too. We I always try to time up if it snows in Tokyo. I look for the Mid Atlantic states 6 to 10 days later. I always use that stuff over there, and it's actually a pretty good predictor. It's not right all the time, but
and
you
of
get the
course, there's
fall.
the this time of year we're looking at typhoons that are recurving and coming back
Yeah,
around the picture around that. So there's a lot of stuff going on globally, and as you can see that some of these we mentioned 95 earlier, the 95 96 winter. That's also La Nina, very active hurricane season. And then there's some of the who's of December's in there, and then the overall forecast. And as you mentioned, this is just not a blanket warm forecast for the eastern and southern U.S. This is going to get there by some pretty extreme swings, and we
yeah.
see
As
that
long
right
as we
now in
don't lock
November. I
it,
mean, it's 80 degrees for crying out loud in New York.
as long as I have to keep telling people, remember, Canada is closer to the North Pole. The United States is closer to the equator. You know, so, I mean, obviously, if you get a fast zonal flow or something like that, you're sort of cooked in the United States. But the the interesting thing about this is the way it goes back and forth. We are concerned about the big cold outbreak in December. All right, but if you get to the forecast with a lot of back and forth over here, chances are when the uh, weather argues, there's a lot of precipitation. You get 10 precipitation events of 1 inch in New York City, and two or three of them happen to be snow and freezing rain. All of a sudden, you're going, what? Right? So we got to watch out for that. The highest area of concern as far as this forecast busting is the Northeast. All right, because I can see anything from New York City with a 40 to 50 inch season to another season in where as far as lack of snow. But
And
so
that's going to be a
hey,
lot
let's
dependent on storm track, right? Because if the storm track cuts this way, that's one thing. If it cuts up the coast this way, it's another thing.
Yeah, well, and various storms. I mean, in the old days, we used to actually have storms that cut a secondary off Atlantic City, and it just changes to freezing rain, and then the Arctic air comes in right after. So, the thing to remember is high variability right now. I don't believe something's going to just completely lock in for like a month, but I may be wrong about that because the last couple of winters it has. And the forecast is there it is. Tom just analog it. And the winter of 21-22 could show up. So uh, I excuse me, I'm stuttering over here.
There's a lot of uncertainty, I think is what you're getting at. I mean, there's still, I mean, we hate to admit that as meteorologists that we don't know what's going to happen, but there is a big question mark this winter, and some of the forecasts point to, especially those model forecasts, point to warm winters. And then the other analogs, especially those late hurricane season analogs, point to some pretty sharp cold in December, and then potentially lasting into January. And then those winters, so some of the who's of the strongest winters in terms of snow, have been in these weak to slightly moderate La Ninas that we've seen. So I think there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, especially with all the back and forth we expect.
Yeah, uncertainty is one thing that weather teaches humility to you. But one thing I think we're getting a little bit better at is analyzing 2 to 3 weeks out when a trend may occur for you, and that will give you time to just pound down the salt. All right. I say never watch your sodium when it comes to snow. That's my motto. I guess that's all I've got to say.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening, and we'll be here at Weatherbell guiding you through the winter. Schoenberg will be there guiding you through the salt ordering and everything. So we appreciate your time, and again, enjoy the winter. And Joe, you got to enjoy the
Enjoy the
weather, right?
winter weather. It's the only winter weather we've got.
That's right.